Why are you lending or sending money to people that you know that they're never ever going to pay you back? And just because they're family or friends doesn't mean that you owe them anything. I used to think for the longest time that I'm helping a family members, a friend, until one day I realized that it is not worth it. I used to think that saying no means that I was selfish, especially being in the West, people think that you have a lot of money, like somehow the money grows in the tree. I used to have a friend who, well, she was kind of like my colleague who ended up becoming my friend. And I remember one time that she asked me to lend her money. I don't know what I was thinking. I ended up going into my bank account. I remember, at the time, I only had the exact amount, which was, I think, around $400. And, I wanted to be good friends. I wanted to be like, oh, help and people pleasing. And then I ended up giving her that money. What was the problem was? Instead of her paying me, which took forever, I had to like be behind her, asking her, can you pay me? Can you pay me? She ended up splitting the money. So instead of paying me in full, like I borrowed her, she ended up giving me like 100 here, 50 here. And I'm like, I have my own bills to pay. And I'm like, I have my own bills to pay, but, you know, it made me realize that people don't care much as you think they do. And that same friend ended up traveling to the country that she and I are both from. I remember one time, I saw it on Facebook and I was like, oh, she's back in Africa. Let me see. Or maybe I'll ask my mom to give her maybe some African spices, some cayenne pepper, so she can bring it. But guess what? I called her and I was like, "Hey girl, how are things going? Can you please, just to see, just to feel what was going on." And then, the first thing she told me, she was like, "Oh, things are so hard here. Everybody want money from me. So and so is asking me for this to pay their school fee, to buy them stuff." And then she had the audacity to ask me, "Would you please borrow me $1,000?" Yeah, not like $100 or $200, $1,000. And I'm like, first of all, even if I have that kind of money in my account, I'm not going to give you that. And second of all, she already moved to another state. So how am I supposed, like, when, let's say when she come back here, how am I supposed to reach out? Who am I going to go to? Am I going to go to the police? We're not even in the same state anymore, and all of that to say is that you cannot set yourself on fire just to keep other people warm. I have heard this over and over. And don't get me wrong, sometimes people do ask because they genuinely need help, and at that point, if you have it, then yes, of course, please help, but don't go into debt and getting credit cards, just trying to give people money. And one of the reasons too is that whenever you give someone money, especially people who are from our side of the world, they think that you have a lot more where that come from. Instead of them investing, instead of them using that money to start up a business, they would use it up all to buy designer clothes, because the value of the dollar amount and the currency where I'm from, it's a vastly different. So they will use that money. You go on Facebook and you see them all dressed up nicely while you are here struggling. I could tell a lot of stories about stuff like that has happened. And I talk about the people back in Africa, but even here in America, I have had people, just because they saw the type of car that I drive, which, by the way, just because you drive a nice car doesn't mean like you have money. There's so many broke people driving around nice cars, it means nothing, you know. So, I will go to visit them and then they will start seeing what I'm wearing. Like these are like people that I actually know. There was one in particular I could think about, and she was touching my jeans. She was like, "Oh, what a nice jean you have," my size is size so so and so. And I'm like, "So you're telling me your size because you want me to buy you this type of jean?" It was just insane. And these are people that are older than you. So in our culture, it's like You don't like, you're not allowed to say no to someone because they're older than you. It's somehow disrespect. So I felt like I was just trying to overextend myself, just to help them. Yeah, so it's just that it happens even here. I could go on and on and on about such people. And the thing is, when you rescue people financially, you ended up becoming their backup plan. Anytime they need stuff, they want to ask you for it. And I'm just like, at this point in my life, I have my family to worry about, my children, my husband. I don't want to be like overextending myself. Like, sometimes people do need it, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just want to use you, especially when people that are here in this country, that is so hard. Like, you work so hard to earn $1. Why would I take my hard earned money? If I calculate the amount of time that my husband put in, it's like, I saw like how much struggle, like how much, like the early morning hours, the late nights, the weekends. Like, he walks his tail off, just so that he could provide for us. For me to selfishly take that money and then give it to someone just because, they saw our outside life, they think that we have it all. And it's not like that. Even if we have it all, it's not for them. It's for my family. you know yeah, if, let's say, it's a need, yes, I could see that. I could see us like really really helping. Let's say someone is really really sick. If we have the means, then yes, of course, by all means. But I'm not just gonna take my last and last and give it to someone just because they are my friends. And I have lost a lot of friends over that. I have, because the moment they start asking you and then you set that boundary, it's like, it's so sad, because then they're gone. And then for me, I have to like watch out and see if it's worth it, for me to have this friend around, because I don't ask for anything. Even when things were so difficult, I never asked a single one of these people for anything. I walked my tail off. Like, I did a bunch of stuff, like I went to night school, I worked during the day, I was in a very bad situation, but I never once asked them for anything. And now that they think, oh, things are okay, like, they just want to like keep asking you and asking you. They're not like my responsibility. You can love your family, you can love your friends, you can you can do all of these things, but you can also say no when it comes to like, giving them money. Protecting your financial situation, it's not selfish. Okay, it's being responsible. It's you trying to make sure that your children have enough when they grow up, so that way you don't have to rely on them, because you were busy helping these people, so you forgot to put enough money, and save enough, so that way when your children are older, they can have a better life. And then you can also have your own retirement without having to depend on your children as their retirement, because it sucks being in that situation. Here in America, it's already been set like that. I see some family and I'm like, wow, like, they don't want anything from their children. Granted, we're in the West, there's a lot of opportunities here versus, where I'm from. Like, there's a lot of poverty. So I could see that, yes, definitely helping, it's just the right thing to do, but that's about it. I'm not like gonna be doing the same thing for my so-called friends, or so-called extended family members, just because they know that I'm here. If you want to know, like, if they're truly truly like there for you, the moment you said no, the moment you said no, that's about it. You are like their greatest enemy. It's like they don't want to hear about you, they don't care, they don't call you to check up on you. All they do is like, they just ignore you, like you never existed. Anyways, I felt like every time I put stuff like this out on the internet, I feel like I'm ranting. But it's really so that, maybe someone else is going through this. I want to reassure them that it's okay. It's okay to say no, especially when you are also trying to build a legacy for your own family, for your own children, for your future. You don't have to do that. I wish I could tell myself that, you know in my 20s. Because if I calculate all of that money that it have just vanished in the air, it's like, gosh, I'm even ashamed like to admit it here. It's a lot of money that could have gone towards my children's tuition, college fund, retirement, 401k. But I don't regret it at all. I'm always happy to help if somebody is struggling, because that's just the right thing to do, like I said. But just because you're related to someone doesn't mean they have an automatic access to your wallet. Protecting your financial stability should not come at your own expense. Sometimes the most selfish thing you can do is say no, because your generosity shouldn't come from your needs. It should come from your wants, meaning that you should not be taking the money that you need, like to live your life, to send it. Then what? Because we all know that in this country the price are fixed. Just because someone is like saying that, oh please, can you lower the prices? No. If the month ended, you didn't pay your rent, guess what? There's no like, oh, I'm just going to give you a discount. No, you have to pay. You don't pay for water, electricity, internet, guess what? It's going to be cut off. And you have a loan, the bank is going to come, like the bank is not going to tell you like, oh, we're just going to let it slide by. No, they're going to send you to collection. People don't joke here when it comes to money, which is really good, because that's why this country is great. That's why I love America, because they're not just gonna like sit there and let you just fool your way. No, they're gonna make sure they trash your credit score. They're gonna do all of this stuff to you, so that way you will learn that you don't just racked up credit debt, to help someone that is miles away or someone that is in this country. Why would I lend my money to somebody that is so far away when I know that I'm not gonna call the police on them? I have to find them first and know where their address is. But anyways, all that to say is just be responsible. You can help someone, you can help people, you can help whoever, as long as you have it, as long as it's not stretching your wallet, as long as you're not taking food from your children's plate, just so that you can be nice, you can be kind to people. So anyways, I think I'm going to end it here, but I hope that you find a thing or two that is valuable in this video. Let me know what you think. Please like and share, and I will see you all next time. Bye.